So first off, we couldn't launch into any wildlife podcast without responding immediately to the incredibly sad news of the passing of Dr. Jane Goodall, one of the leading lights in biology, in natural history, and a human being who it just kind of surpasses any explanation. But I'm sure all three of us would love to just say a few words about quite what a special and important human being she was.
I'll be honest, hearing the news today, when I woke up, my feed was flooded with the news of her passing, and I genuinely felt, like, really overwhelmed because Dr. Jane Goodall, she was more than just an incredible primatologist and conservationist. She was, for me, a massive inspiration as a woman in science, as somebody who, until the very end, every single day committed herself to her cause and to protecting chimpanzees. It's absolutely devastating. And my first kind of time meeting Jane Goodall was actually around 8 years ago, and I was a patron for the Jane Goodall Institute as part of her work with Roots and Shoots, which is all about encouraging young people into conservation. And I sat in this room full. It was like a long table full of young people, inspirational people, and at the head of this table was this woman who just has this presence and awe and kindness that I've never actually seen before. She creates a feeling of hope. I think that's the word I always cling on to with Dr. Jane Goodall. She is an inspiration, and yes, devastating.
I think that's maybe one of the most impressive things, though, for all of the things that she's witnessed and seen and the changes in that 90 years of being on the planet, she still was able to push hope as the most important message. She didn't become pessimistic like I do sometimes, but she seemed like so dedicated. I think just having that momentum at that age when most people have retired, and she worked up until her very last moments because she really believed in the cause of protecting wild spaces for the wildlife on our planet, and so much so she really dedicated her life to it. And I think that's a hell of a baton that she's left. I don't know. I mean, we'll try our best to pick that up and to sort of continue pushing those hopeful messages, but what an absolute legend.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. So I was lucky enough to spend quite a lot of time with Jane Goodall. She actually wrote the foreword for one of my books. And I also had the amazing opportunity to spend an entire night sat next to her at a table at a charity awards do. And the thing that really took me by surprise was, she was well into her 80s by then. She was an old lady. And yet the second she opened her mouth, the vitality, the energy, the passion that she had was simply overwhelming. If I have any portion of that kind of energy, going into my 80s, I will be a very happy person indeed. I think an awful lot of what we are going to focus on when it comes to Jane Goodall and her legacy is going to be that amazing sense of hope, the countless young people across the world that she has brought into the conservation movement. But an awful lot of her early work was utterly groundbreaking and not necessarily in a hopeful way. I mean, I can remember reading some of the stuff that came out of Gombe and her chimpanzees, and just getting this sense that chimps were an animal that indulged in utter brutality. And she brought that to the world by her own determination. And I can remember reading some of it and finding it quite unsettling, quite hard reading in some cases.
I think also that we should give a bit of a nod to Jane's mum, because it's probably nice that they've been reunited right now, but I know she always, all the way through her career, nodded at how important her mum was, because she only managed to do that job in the very first place. She didn't have the science backing, and she wasn't allowed to go overseas on her own. Like, the African government didn't want her there on her own, so her mum went and chaperoned her. When she was out there with the chimps, her mum's there making the camp and boiling the kettle and doing everything as well with her. And I think it's so amazing to see how far you can come if you, I mean, you must see it with your kids as well, Steve, but if you're able to really feed those passions and to encourage people. And she then went on to dedicate most of her life and encouraging others to do the same thing. So epic lady.
Well, the wild world has lost one of its shining lights. We are far poorer now that you've gone. but for all that you have brought to us, all of the learning, all of the hope. Jane Goodall, we salute you. And now let's launch into the main episode. Hello and welcome to another That's Just Wild Q&A, where we take on your burning questions about nature and wildlife. I'm Steve Backshall, and as always, I'm joined by...
Me, Lizzie Daly.
And me, Sarah Roberts.
Now, the first question for you, Steve, today is from James Gregson via email. My name is James from Blackpool. Just got to say, love the show and you guys, and it's already one of my favourite podcasts. So thank you, James. Anyway, my question for Steve is, as a tarantula enthusiast and keeper, I've often wondered why certain colour patterns on certain tarantulas have evolved the way they have. One I can think of is the Guti ornamental sapphire tarantula.
Like how you cut out the scientific name there. Lizzie, yeah, strong.
Saving face there.
Poikilotheria metallica.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The particular tarantula boasts a deep blue coloration with bright yellow bandings on their legs. They are an arboreal tree-dwelling species from India. Amazing. Would this colour pattern not stand out and make them an obvious target for predators, or has this been evolved as a potential warning sign to other animals? Many thanks for allowing the Q&A platform. Love listening to it. Keep up the great work, guys. And many thanks, James.
So first off, James, thank you very much. You are my people. I know where you're coming from. I was also a proud tarantula breeder enthusiast myself. Secondly, one of your favourite podcasts. Seriously,
Rude.
James, get with the programme. Yeah.
Rude.
Just rude. So this question actually is quite dear to my heart. The bright blue tarantulas are something that I have had a real passion for over the years. And I do have a kind of sad story connected to them, in that when we were doing Lost Land of the Tiger in Bhutan, I found a bright blue tarantula and did piece the camera about how beautiful it was. And, you know, there are several different species of bright blue tarantulas found around the world. And then after we'd finished the expedition and we got back, I started talking to one of my friends who was a tarantula enthusiast about having found the sapphire tarantula. And he went, no, those live in Thailand. And he went, there's another one that lives in South India, but there's nothing in Bhutan. And we went through all the literature and there was no bright blue tarantula known from Bhutan. So I'd filmed this species. We hadn't taken a sample. We hadn't really done. And almost certainly it was new to science, and because I was so ignorant, I didn't realise, and so we never got it as part of the expedition, which would have been weapons grade.
Did you not even use it in the show? Because
didn't even get into the show.
Technically
didn't
not.
Get into the show.
The actual.
Surely
Because,
that's evidence. You could use that. I guess you need DNA.
I guess I could probably trawl back through the footage, but without actually having a specimen, not enough. So yeah, one of my absolute fails in my career, which I've just owned up to in my own podcast. Yes,
that could have been another one named after you as well.
It could have been.
Oh
my
my
gosh!
gosh!
Imagine that.
Tarantulas.
Where-
Backshawlius.
When you say, I was actually meaning the Backshall list, but that kind of works really well, Lizzie. I like what you did there. When you say bright blue, like what we talking here?
Electric blue, and it's not colour as in pigment, but it's down to microscopic sort of filaments inside the hairs on the legs of the spider that reflect light in a certain way, that they do look electric blue. And this is the interesting bit, because, you know, James's question, I mean, it sort of gives the answer in the question, but tarantulas, unlike some other species of spider that have amazing visual acuity and may have amazing dances to attract females, so like the peacock jumping spider, absolute classic, they have fabulous eyesight. The males also have incredible colours to attract females. Well, most tarantula species have very poor eyesight, and they probably don't even see in colour at all. So then the kind of only other option is as a warning. And this is the interesting bit, that the particular species of spider he's talking about is known in the trade as being one that's a really good one to have as a pet. It's quite a docile one. It's a nice spider to keep. They're relatively easy. But if they bite, it hurts like hell. And classically, tarantulas, if they bite, the venom's next to nothing. So it seems likely that this bright blue colour is aposematic. It is a warning. It's letting other animals know that this is a spider that is not to be trifled with, because it is super venomous and a bite is really going to hurt.
Would there be anything as well in the fact that they, you know, are out hunting at night time, and whether that blue, that structural colour that you talked about, maybe holds kind of something very different visually
Like
to
they couldn't
others
see it,
in the
maybe.
environment. Yeah, maybe to other tarantulas, or whether, for a lot of invertebrates that do have that structural coloration, that amazing kind of vivid vibrancy, whether that holds any truth. It seems like blue as such a rare colour generally. I'm just wondering why it has that kind of amazing blue.
As it's structural, do you not need light to see it? So when you see them at night, if you flash your head torch across them, then they absolutely light up. It's like there's light from within. But if you're not shining a light on them, you don't see it.
Yeah.
And during the daytime, they're very evident as having that bright blue. But also the fact that other tarantulas probably don't see that blue kind of makes it seem to me like it's kind of got to be a warning.
Yeah. How much diversity is there in that blue across tarantulas?
Oh, good question. It's not massively common. I mean, starting at the most broad, tarantula itself is not a scientific term. It's one which, we kind of tend to use for any
Is it like a seagull?
big, hairy spider.
Oh, beepity beep.
Yeah.
Beepity beep. We don't
I
say
didn't
seagull
know
on this
it
podcast.
was a seagull.
Kind of. If you want to really hack off Bill Oddie,
Can we not?
say
we
the
not?
word seagull. But yeah, so tarantula is not a scientific term. We tend to say any big hairy spider, we call it a tarantula.
Okay.
But there's probably around about 900, 1,000 different kinds that would fit into that definition. And of that, maybe only 10 or a dozen have that electric blue colour. It's not common.
Okay. Wow.
But in this particular one, it's a bitey one.
For ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com.
Now, for you, Sarah, your question is from David and Emily. It's via email, and they say, having done so much work in sea life conservation and rising issues surrounding large-scale fishing, etc., what is your stance on consuming fish as part of your diet? I know there's been controversy surrounding the MSC label, but is it the best we can get at this time? Coming from someone who does currently eat fish probably once a week, but is constantly conflicted on this topic. Love the pod. Keep up the good work. Thanks, David and Emily.
That's such a good question, David and Emily. It's a really interesting one because I have friends within my career that will eat meat and won't eat fish, just will not touch seafood. Shark Mandan, for example, is one of them. And I also have friends that have worked in the oil industry that also won't touch seafood. And I think that's also for reasons of contamination and other things that seafood can have inside of it. I personally do eat seafood, not in large amounts at all, probably about on par with what they're saying, maybe once a week, maybe even once every 2 weeks. But it is tricky. So for anyone that doesn't know, the MSC logo is the Marine Stewardship Council logo. And it's a non-for-profit that basically they try to use science and also local communities to incentivize sustainable fishing practices. So they want to stop those huge trawling vessels and also to try and make sure that the fish that you're eating is from a stock that is sustainable. So there's a lot of science that goes into it, a lot of counting, but they have come under scrutiny, and that's a little bit to do with human rights and other sides of it too. And
it's
also
complex, isn't it?
bycatch. Oh, fishing is such a complex topic. It's really, really hard to get it right. My honest advice is if you really like fish, if you live anywhere near the coast, then probably your best shout would, if you can, would be to become a fisherman, spearfish or catch your own with a rod and line if you are going to clue yourself up on the species and the size, and then you'll get to know what locally is around and what the patterns are. That would probably be the absolute most epitome of how you could be sustainable in that industry. But for most of us, that's not really an option. So I would also recommend just going to your local fish merchants or suppliers and actually speaking with them, talking to them to say, well, where's this come from? What are you seeing in your patterns? What are you seeing a lot of? In general, there's 5 species of fish, 5 fish types that we tend to eat a little bit too much, which are the prawns, the salmon, the cod, the tuna and the hake. They're often really quite a high pressure amount on those particular species. So if you can avoid those, and also maybe mussels are really quite sustainable if you do like seafood. I won't go into the filter feed inside of it, but mussels, if you're not worried so much about what's in the stomach, can be quite
Which, by the way,
sustainable.
you should be, because there's filter feeders.
This
They
is
can
what I
get
mean.
really contaminated.
Yeah, there's so many angles to come at from this. But I would also suggest, depending on where you are in the world, you can also often find Marine Conservation Society in the UK is great. They have a green list that will tell you which fish species are, good to go at the moment in 2025. But also, if you're in America, then Monterey Aquarium, I think, also have a kind of a green list version where you can see which species you should be leaning towards. But what do you guys think?
I used to spearfish.
Yeah.
I used to do spearfishing. I used to do quite a lot of foraging for mussels,
Amazing.
free diving down for scallops.
Yep.
Cooking it up with seaweed and rock samphire and all that on the beach. Catching a sea bass, catching a mackerel or a pollock, fish that genuinely we do have sustainable stocks of in our waters, and you can choose the exact one you want. I used to come away from that feeling like I had a proper communal experience with our seas, and I'd done something properly sustainable and feeling quite good about myself at the end of the day. I stopped doing it after a couple of times that I came out of the sea with my spear gun in my hand to see a bunch of kids on the beach going, "There's Steve Backshaw with a spear gun. What's he been doing? Like shooting dolphins in the face?" And after that, I kind of gave it a miss. But there are ways of using the sea sustainably. We almost never do it. It is frightening the way that we interact with our seas and the kind of stuff that we, particularly in this country, we don't eat any of the fish we catch. We have a totally bonkers connection to the sort of stuff that is in our seas and that our fishermen are bringing in and what we actually consume. It's absolutely bananas that we are eating Pacific bluefin tuna and Alaskan salmon, and yet we have some fish in our seas, sardines and pollock and mackerel that you could eat reasonably well, and we just don't touch them.
Yeah. I was put off very early on in my career through a documentary I made on salmon farming. And I think you mentioned some of the complexities around, looking at fishing and farming. And it's just, I was like face to face with underneath the net of a salmon farm. I probably shouldn't admit that on camera because we weren't supposed to be there. But we saw the status of the seabed and it was horrific. I'm talking like a metre of just utter crap, essentially, as well as then these salmons actually in really bad condition, covered in lice, destroying our populations. I know it's only one species, but you mentioned there some of the ones that we should be really, really mindful of. And I think it's down to how it's a state of mind in a way. It sounds a bit wafty, but as a consumer, you don't have to not eat fish. It's not that black and white, is it? It's just about being a more sensible and responsible consumer.
I think it is one of the harder topics to navigate, though. There is quite a lot to it. But like you say, Steve, though, if you can connect yourself, if you have that opportunity of a local river or something like that, then I think you can learn so much and feel so much more stewardship towards that area as well and protecting it as a result of catching your food from that area. I think there's some real perks that can come of that if it's done well and done sustainably. And I should also mention, if you wanted to find out any more information on salmon particularly, Jim Murray does a good podcast, which is The Last Salmon, where they talk and interview all sorts of anglers and people from within the salmon industry, because that, as you just mentioned there, Lizzie, is an absolute minefield right now. But anyway, let's move on. Question for Lizzie. And this one comes from Natalie Kilburn via Instagram. And it says, how the heck have dolphins and whales managed to evolve echolocation?
I love the how the heck. So I think it's like when we talk about species in in history and through evolution, we just assume that one day they just rock up and they're like, today I'm echolocating. But no, it's gradual changes over time, right? So fossil evidence, has shown us that some of our early cetaceans, when they first went marine, when they first went into our waters some 55 million years ago, moving from terrestrial mammals then into our waters, they have had already specialised hearing. And that's because a large part of that kind of movement is as you're heading into an aquatic environment, your ability to see is hindered, right? That sense is less dependent on. So that transition to then starting to rely on having kind of that modified ear bone, and then slowly evolving over hundreds and thousands of years, more of a melon head to be able to listen to these high frequency sounds, that echolocation that a lot of our toothed whales are I can never say that word. Odontocetes, thank you. Our toothed whales are using to be able to echolocate. And so it's gradual changes over time. It's not an instant thing. And characteristics that we see, in some of our best echolocators today, like beluga whales, are the epitome of how over time these characteristics have evolved. That's like a very kind of broad overview of how echolocation has come about.
It must be quite hard, though, to make that concise, because it's millions and millions of years of changes, isn't it?
I think one of the interesting things is seeing that actually very, very primitive echolocation, it works and is relatively simple, and that we can even do it ourselves. I have no idea if this is going to work in a podcast, but this is something that I've done in theatre audiences. Now, if you put your hand out in front of you here like this.
Okay.
And can you guys do it? Can you do that? Right. Okay. So if you do that, close your eyes.
Is this a trick or something?
Bring your hand towards you as you go.
I feel like you're setting us up, Steve.
No, not at all.
This is like a bad. Yeah.
I mean, you've got your eyes open, Lizzie. So it's not going to work. In the right situation, you will be able to hear when you've got something solid in front of you. And if someone was to do it to you,
sure.
you can hear it. You can hear things in front of you. We have had blind people who can cycle a bike, who can tell you what an object is that you put in front of them just by doing that, by clicking and the hearing, resolving the sound, bouncing back off something in front of you. And we have none of the facilities that an orca or a dolphin has. So you can see how even just being able to resolve tiny amounts of bounce back sound is the beginnings of echolocation.
Yeah.
And then over millions of years, it gets more and more profound until it becomes this extraordinary super sense that enables them to perceive everything in their world in 3 dimensions using bounce back sound.
It's so amazing. And I can imagine those sounds like the clicks, the ones that do travel further, able to give you more of that information on that bounce back as they're echolocating. Those are the ones that were selected for, and that's kind of how it evolved over time. That's really cool, by the way. I'm just going to walk down the streets of London going,
Yeah, people
walking into lampposts.
So we've actually done a lot of study as well based on the particular echolocations of bats and certain kinds of whales. And what I really like is if you listen to echolocation that's being used to find prey, it starts with big, loud, spaced out sounds. And then as they get closer to the object they're trying to pinpoint, the sounds get quieter and they get much closer together until it becomes almost like a buzz. And so effectively they're going, and it's bouncing back off something in front of them. And a bat is finding a moth on the wing. A sperm whale might be finding a squid at 2,000 meters below the surface. And you can basically hear them doing it using sound. Absolutely
in real
extraordinary.
time.
So if we lost our eyesight at some point, would that be a possibility that we would maybe be able to evolve something like that ourselves?
Well, so, like I said,
Absolutely.
I have worked with a blind person who taught me to echolocate in about an hour and a half.
Wow.
And he had me, I mean, the stuff that he could do was just mind blowing. And he made me want to cry. Just being able to live a completely normal life, fully blind since birth. He had me in a blindfold for about 2 hours. And I have to say it was the most overwhelmingly claustrophobic feeling I've ever had. But at the end of that 2 hours, I was finding my way around, finding a handle on a door, not just the door, but the handle on the door by using clicking and sound. So yes, I mean, you can learn relatively quickly to be able to do very primitive echolocation.
Wow.
Epic. Love
Yeah.
that. I'm going to turn nocturnal. That's it. That's my life now. Right, final question, Steve, is from Dan Lang via email. My name is Dan, and I'm going backpacking for a year around Southeast Asia, Australia and New Zealand. Epic. I plan to make a species log and record everything I see. I wanted to get your opinion on how I should approach this. Would you have it by family, group, subtype, invertebrates, vertebrates, country, habitats, etc.? Let me know what you think.
Oh.
Thanks, Dan. P.S. I'm an avid listener of the pod. Brings me lots of joy. Keep up the good work.
Why did I get that big sigh from Sarah next to me?
That's intense, isn't it? That's an intense scrapbook right there, but really interesting.
Sarah, that's gold.
Yeah, she's saying
That's
that.
gold.
And as you're doing it, I can see you thinking, why? Why?
Can't be bothered.
Do you know it's going to get worse because, I did this.
Steve's got one.
I knew you would have done.
Yeah, I did. In 1990, I took a year out before university and I went traveling around Southeast Asia completely on my own. And I kept diaries every single day that I was there. And I did just this. And I drew pictures in the pages of these really scrappy notebooks that I bought.
Like a young Darwin.
Well, I mean, it was a lot less important, the Darwin, to the world. But to me now, those scrapbooks, unfortunately, they got... there was a flood at my mum and dad's house and they got damaged by water.
Could you save any of them?
Oh, I've saved them all.
Oh, okay,
but quite
great.
a lot of them, the pages are stuck together and things.
Yeah.
They remain one of my most precious possessions. They're in my loft right now. And going back to those books and seeing all the things that I saw in 1990, and you think about how long ago that was and how much all those places have changed. Those are a real written memory of a time that very few people had actually written about. I was traveling to places like Sumba, Savu and Roti and Timor that very few people were going to in 1990.
Epic.
And to be able to read, not just my records of the animals that I saw, but how I felt at the time, the emotions I was going through. I was on my own for huge amounts of time. They are an incredibly precious record of a really special time in my life. And so to you, Dan, I would say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all how you choose to, break up your memoirs, how you choose to record it, what way you do, just do it. And I would also say, it doesn't matter whether you can draw or not, but try and draw it. And if you can do it writing as opposed to, doing it on a laptop or whatever, it will be that much more precious to you. Because, now today, if my house was to burn down, one of the first things that I would go and run and save would be those diaries. Because, they're like a little snapshot in time of my life.
The drawing side of it is something I absolutely have done a lot of times, depending on what species it is, and made some notes.
But Sarah, also taking the time and to Dan's point and your point, it's so important in that moment to write it down because you're not going to do it in a week. And more often than not, I don't know if you find this, I never rewrite up my notes, which I really should get better at. But usually it's like a random scribble or a description or a colour or a sound, and I just have to write it down in that moment. But yeah, all of that is building, I guess, your mind in terms of how to be a naturalist and all those things, whether you're drawing or writing.
Yeah, and have an incredible time, Dan. I am very, very jealous. It was probably the greatest time of my whole life being on my big overseas experience, and you're going to have a great time.
Love it. That's it for this week. Send your questions along to questions@that'sjustwild.com and we'll answer them on the show.
That's Just Wild is an original Fresh Air production. The producers are Eva Higginbotham and Emma Crampton. Your support is really welcome. You can follow us on your favourite podcast app. Leave us a review. It makes all the difference to the whole team.
And for ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com. Remember, we're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and you can find us at That's Just Wild Pod.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.